Welcome to Transcendence Talks podcast with your host, licensed professional counselor, Kristy Crabtree. Join us as we build the bridge between psychology and spirituality and discuss psychology for the soul.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Transcendence Talks podcast. I am here today with Stephanie Potter and I'm so excited for you guys to meet her. I feel like our paths have been very parallel in a lot of ways. Sort of like my story, Stephanie up until 2016 worked for corporate America. And I'm so excited for her to share her story today about how she started working with the Akashic Records and started channeling spirit, and her life took a complete 180. I know a lot of our listeners are going through similar processes of awakening and really just trying to understand, how do I get on the path that is most aligned for me? So with that, Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate that intro. Very kind. I'm excited to be here with your community. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, let's jump in.
Okay.
Tell me, I'm so curious, how did you move from this path of corporate America, normal human life, right, into kind of this world of awakening?
Yeah. So let me take you back to the 6th grade. My dad would come into my room every once in a while and be like, Stephanie, when you get out in the world, you need to get a corporate job that has really good benefits and retirement package. And I'm like, thanks, Dad. I'm in the 6th grade, okay, take that for what it's worth. But can I have $5 to get some gas for my car?
Right.
And so fast forward, I come out of college and kind of get into corporate America. And I, for the first 10 years or so of my experience, it was just general corporate America, moving up, figuring things out. But I was always, since I graduated college, interested in metaphysics. So I like to take that as the time where I was taking in a lot of information. And so I laugh, and I was listening to books on CD. That is how old I am, dating myself.
Yes.
So listening to some John Edwards talk about channeling and mediumship on CDs, right?
On your Walkman?
In the car, putting in a CD, or maybe some Sylvia Brown, whatever it was, right? Old school.
Those were the best Montel Williams shows with Sylvia.
And so that was me really just taking in a lot of it. And then up around 2016, I had been in a job that I had been at for 5 years. I really loved the company, had been there a while and got laid off. And so that was not earth shattering, but very identity shattering for me. And that was the beginning of a trend. I've been laid off now 4 or 5 times. I'm still somewhat in corporate America, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but it's kind of chewed me up and spit me out. So growing up with my dad telling me this is success, this is what will keep you money coming in and stability, has been less than stable. I'd like to think the universe played a little hand in it, not just my own worth, but every time I got laid off, I was doing more and more around learning metaphysics. And so that first time I was able to, where in the past, and I had been taking in information, listening to podcasts, anytime there was and now do this exercise, I'd be flip the page, just give me the information. I'm not going to practice. And then when all of this happened, I really started to feel that pull towards okay, you've got a little extra money from severance. Why don't you try to get into a class where you actually have to do the work, right? You have practice partners, you might get a certification, whatever it is. And that's really where all this started for me. In addition, that layoff was a bunch of personal things happened. I had an engagement breakup about a year later. My father passed a year later. There's just kind of one thing after another. I've been in a pretty turbulent time, I'd say, for the last 8 years. I think I'm coming out of it. Maybe it's that 7-year Saturn cycle. I'm not sure.
Brutal.
But has changed me both inside out. And so learning metaphysics, finding the Akashic Records, looking at so many other modalities, just curious seeker, human design, numerology, astrology, oracle cards, you name it. I've kind of been in it and seeking and that sort of thing. I like to tell the story that when I first started, I was afraid I'd have no spiritual gifts, right? And so I was well, if I can just learn something that's metaphysical, but more scientific, so astrology or human design, it's there's so much to learn there that you can kind of teach yourself it. Ignorantly thinking that it wasn't intuitive. Now I know it's so intuitive, but to me it felt I can teach myself this. I don't need to have any spiritual gifts.
Right.
Spoiler alert, everybody has spiritual gifts. It's just figuring out what they are. And that's kind of the start of that path for me.
Absolutely. So how did you stumble upon yours? I mean, because I totally get it. It feels okay, astrology feels safe. There's a map, literally a map in the sky. And I just learned how to read the star map. And I can give this beautiful information to people, which I find, my gosh, I truly think that we choose the time of our birth because
Yeah.
the way that the stars are set up are the lessons that we came in to learn, and they keep nudging us back on. It's like we literally choose the map based on the stars, and that's the moment we choose to incarnate. I mean, because it's that accurate every time I've gotten.
I just got chills as you said that because I resonate so highly with it. And it means to me that spirit's really like, yes, talk about this. And so for me, something that I had heard and kind of learned as well is one of my teachers, Nikki Novo, she talks about how like astrology and human design, all of these are like little like crumbs as to what our soul is here to do. So whichever way you follow it, whether, you want to look at one spiritual modality over another, over maybe even one you create, whatever it might be that your heart's pulled to, these are all like crumbs and information about what your soul's here to do. And so for me, the way that I got into figuring out what my gifts were is that when I first started listening, like I had some great experiences with mediums. I have a lot of family that's passed, which means, not a lot of people here, but a lot of people on the other side to talk to, right? And so I just saw how much healing that could bring for somebody, right? Because I've been in talk therapy, I've done hypnotherapy, spiritual therapy, you name it. But there's something in mediumship when you have somebody that is so in their integrity, can bring through such clear information that it can heal somebody in an hour what years of talk therapy can do, right? And I do talk therapy. It's got its own time and place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had always prayed, man, I would love to be a medium. I have high integrity. I would really love to do this. But that wasn't the gifts that came right away. And so for me, it was figuring that out. A lot of people like have these wonderful awakenings where they're like, yeah, I just woke up one day and I was seeing dead people, Sure. Or like, I just had this Kundalini awakening and I can see auras now, or whatever it is, right? Yes. I'm not that person. I, sometimes would get like good intuitive hits growing up and maybe like some premonitional dreams of like nothing that was ever important.
Mm-hmm.
But, my grandmother on my father's side, I think she was highly intuitive, and my great-grandmother on my mom's side. But they weren't psychics. They didn't do this. They weren't, using tarot cards or anything like that. But for me, the interest was always there. And so when I started doing these classes, it kind of helped me figure out what are my gifts, because some people have clairvoyance, they can see. Some people get downloads of information, claircognizance. And so it's this super fun path to go through and figure out what are my gifts. There are people that see people's face shift and, it just depends. And so for me, it was going through and figuring out, okay, what are the first gifts that show up and then how can I use them? I would say it takes practice, but I would, again, tell everyone out there, everybody has these gifts. It's like skills. You've got 3-year-olds that can play Beethoven, right? And you're like, how does that even happen? And so like, if you're ever doubting it, like, no, like you have intuition. We all have it. We're just not taught how to use it.
Absolutely. And, it's so interesting because I think your story is one that echoes a lot of other people's stories. The work I do with my clients, I see it in their stories. I see it in my own story. It's like sometimes we have to keep falling down again and again and again, or maybe we are not falling. Maybe the universe is knocking us off the path because we're so dense in thinking, oh my gosh, my dad always told me since I was in the 6th grade that I need the corporate job with the retirement plan, that I just keep trying the same thing over and over again, but I'm not getting the results that I want. And so sometimes it's not that we failed. It's just a sign that we're not on the right path and there's something more in our soul to explore. There's like something more that we're more passionate about or aligned with. And it sometimes feels like we have to get cracked open in order to come to this conclusion.
Yeah. I agree. Like I had a lot of shame around like, why do I I'm the common denominator. Why do I keep getting laid off? Like, I know I do a good job with my work. I'm not having personal issues. I'm getting promoted at some of these jobs, that sort of thing. And what I think it was obviously a combination of a few things is that one, the universe is pointing me towards where I wanted to go, which was having this business that I'm starting now and the work that I'm doing now that I will do one day full time. And so every time I was meeting the right people, getting the right skills and experiences, I was learning the things I need to do to now bring it over to this kind of business that I'm doing now. But also, like I said, I found some shame in it because like I'm the common denominator when this happens so many times, you know what I mean? But I would look back and be like, no, I was getting great reviews. I was like getting, bonuses and all of these different things. And so like for a while, I was kind of kicking myself about it. But now I look at it as if I look back and I'm like, oh, that's the universe saying you've learned what you needed to learn, move on. And I'm even in one of of those breaks right now. I dealt with a layoff last year. I've been able to take some time. I had a whole bunch of personal things happen at the end of last year. It all worked out for me. And now here I am looking for maybe some somewhat financial stability, but then also stepping into this business now too. But I wouldn't have done it unless that happened. And so it is this weird kick in the butt, right?
It always is. And I think it really cultivates our faith, because we have two ways to look at it. We could look at it like, well, I just keep failing, and we could be really hard on ourselves, and we can choose to shrink in the face of that. Or we could say, hey, this is an opportunity, and now I have this gift of time, and I'm going to use it to create something beautiful, where I can really serve people with my gifts. And it takes a lot of courage and faith to do the latter.
I also say it takes great mentors, because for me, some of that I couldn't see. So I have two or three great mentors and a great therapist that kind of talk me through of like, yes, like you might have some shame around that, but think about all the experiences you've had, the skills that you have, the people that you've met, the projects you've worked on. Like, even though you may not have that job or that financial stability, think about all those things that you were given with that can't be taken away from you.
Yes.
And that you carry forward for a reason. And so that was really a powerful, like, reframe. And so, like, I would also tell anybody, like, even if you're not happy at the current job that you have and you're kind of chasing your passions, think about the reframe of what your current job is giving you so that you can chase your passions.
Yeah, sometimes it's a platform, right? Sometimes it's a platform to give you roots, stability, right? So that you can branch out and you can grow.
Yes.
Absolutely. I love that so much. So, okay, let's talk about your gifts, and learning the Akashic and all these beautiful modalities.
So I go back and forth about calling them gifts, and that might be just me getting in my head too much, because gift sounds like, oh, it's something I got that you didn't. And so maybe I'm like going to start rebranding it as like psycho skills. I don't know what you want to call it, because the idea is like we can teach ourselves to do these things. Mm-hmm. So like if you and I were going out and like, okay, we're both going to learn to play basketball together. I imagine you probably have some height on me, as I am 5'1". And so like there might be things that you just pick up and do better naturally, but I could teach myself to play basketball. I may never be as good as you, but I could teach myself. And that's the same way that these skills work. So I'd like to say, like, a lot of times there are ones that are going to come more naturally to us, right? And so that's where we talk about the clair. So we have clairsentience, which is clair feeling. So you might feel something in your body physically. You might feel an emotion. About 40% of people, that's their strongest gift that they have right away. So it's like when you walk into a room and you can tell like the energy's off. Or I like to tell people sometimes, like if you're at a concert or in a church and all of a sudden the vibration goes up and you start getting those tingles, that's your clairsentience. You already have that gift. Mm-hmm. The next thing we talk about is clairvoyance. And so that's clear seeing. So whether you're seeing something in your mind's eye or actually seeing an aura or something in front of you physically. For me, that is the one at the bottom. Still developing that guy. And so that one's a little tougher for me. The next one is clairaudience. And so that's when you're hearing things. What I like to tell people is it's often in your own voice. And so people don't know that because you're like, it just sounds like one of my thoughts. But if it's information you didn't know and it's coming from a loving place, a lot of times that's clairaudience. That's the spirit talking to you or something along those lines, depending on your own beliefs.
The discernment in that one for me is the hardest.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Because the other one that comes with it is claircognizance. And that's when you get downloads of information that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And that also comes in your own voice. And those two are my strongest, is clairaudience and claircognizance for sure.
Yeah.
And so learning to figure those out. I work with the Akashic Records and we'll talk more about that. But in that, I use all of those senses as well as everything that I've ever learned in my life. So when spirit comes through to talk to me, they do it through a bias of everything that they know about me, my experiences, my pain, my trauma, my joy, my everything. And so that's why I think that, when I talk about having gone through so much in the last 8 years, I kind of feel like it was like a program plan to see if I was going to sink or swim, because that's what's going to bring me the best ability to reach people when I'm working with them.
It's so true. I know in my experience too, it felt like some kind of an initiation where it's like, we're going to put you through the ringer. I call it like the refiner's fire.
I call it the gauntlet.
Gauntlet. It's like, you're going to walk through the fire, but it's only so that you can burn off all the pieces of you that are dense and that you no longer need. So like brand new, fresh growth can kind of come through and you can really refine your tools and your skills.
Yeah. And within my own beliefs, like I think my soul had a hand in this. I thought I was going to be like, hey, let's see if she's going to sink or swim this time. And, we're going to set it up like this, because only if she goes through these and successfully still wants to do this work and finds it, then we're going to then she can do it and do it well. But if not, maybe there are different paths for her.
Can I drill down on something you said that I feel is so critical
Sure.
before we get into the Akashic? Because you just said, I think my soul had a hand in setting this up. And I just want to say yes, 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 because there's always this like conversation around like free will versus destiny. And like what does God have in store for us, and what is ours to plan? And I think we actually plan all of it. And on a soul level, I think we co-create on a soul level with God, with the divine, and say, this is what my soul wants. And God goes, yeah, of course, then go after it, child, right? And then we do. So it's almost like we have free will, although sometimes our soul's plan and our humanness disagree. Because in our humanness, sometimes I get these WTF moments. Like, why would my soul do that? Yeah. Why would my soul choose these things, these lessons, whatever? And my humanness wants to vehemently disagree.
To it, you have the great plans for your soul and what you want to learn in this incarnation or this one time around, depending on what your beliefs are. Then we have the great forgetting. Yes. So you forget, yes. Right? You come down here and to really go through it. And that's where the free will kicks in. Because I believe like you, we choose our parents, we choose the kind of bodies that we want to come into, the families, the cultures, the races, religions, all of that, right? Because we're here to have all these different soul contracts. And so there is free will, and I'm never going to be off my path because I'm going to choose things. But I do believe that there are things that are divinely set up for me to step into, and for every person as well. And that also is a reminder that everybody has a purpose. Even if you're not feeling yours right now, a purpose, a mission, a direction, know that you have one, if not many.
Yes, one, if not many, right? Because gosh, at the end of a lifetime, we impact countless lives in ways big and small that sometimes, our ripple, we can't even begin to imagine what our actions, choices, behaviors, love, fear, how it impacted the people around us, right?
I love that quote around, I thought I was wise, so I tried to change the world, but then I became smart and just changed myself. That is an absolute it's way more beautiful than that. But I just think that is a beautiful reminder that who you are every day, how you carry yourself, your happiness, your joy, the love that you have for others, the decisions you make in love and not fear, all of those things have impact on you and the people around you. And then even just by smiling and helping other people for no reason other than to do it from a place of love is part of your mission. And that can be impactful, even just that one thing.
Absolutely. I love that you said that, because you're right. Our purpose doesn't always align with our career choices or our jobs. Sometimes, like you said, a job is a platform so that we can serve in the ways that bring us joy and then create that ripple for the other people. And I think sometimes we could get so caught up in these expectations that our purpose has to look or feel or carry out in a certain way.
Or even just be this one thing. Purpose sometimes sounds like this final destination of I'm finally in my purpose, or I have my purpose. And so I love the word purpose, but I like to say purposes or purposeful or direction or missions, because that grows and changes as you grow and change and who you are as a soul.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, let's talk about the Akashic. At first, for our listeners who may not know what the Akashic Records are, can we just speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm going to say that I've come up with a term. I love it and hate it, but the term is sliding scale of woo.
Okay.
Okay, so we have this sliding scale, right? So people that are just kind of dipping their toe in, learning about more spiritual, metaphysical things, and then people that are like me all the way on the other end. And so I'm going to talk to kind of both ends of the scale. And I'm also going to stay on the spiritual side, not the quantum. There's a whole lot of quantum physics and science that can explain it. I am not your guy for that. I can point you in some directions. But the Akashic Records, actually, you've probably heard of it in many other terms. Sometimes people call it the Book of Life. So it shows up in Christianity and the Muslim faith and some other places as the Book of Life or the Tree of Knowledge, things like that. And the idea is that it is an energetic imprint of anything that has existed, will exist, and will exist in the future. And so that a lot of times we look at it like a library because it's easier to understand that way. And so when we think about humans, I believe that we reincarnate. So our soul, we have one soul, but we live many different lifetimes. And so the way I explain that to somebody is imagine going to a library where you open a room and it's the room for your soul. So whatever your soul is, and you open the door and you walk in and there are books for every incarnation that you've ever been in, right? Now, if you don't believe in reincarnation, you believe we live here once, maybe there's just one book. Right. So insert your own beliefs here. And the idea is that also places, spaces, plants, animals, they all have Akashic records. And I'm able to kind of access them energetically and bring information down from them. Every Akashic record reader works a little bit differently. It's just like kind of like every gardener works a little bit differently, right? They garden it a little bit different way. It seems really overwhelming because you're like, everything that ever existed, I'm just going to access that, no big deal, right? But to bring it down, it's really a way to check in with like your spirit, your higher self, whatever your soul, like whatever your beliefs are, as well as the guidance around you. So your team and spirit, if you believe in spirit guides and angels and loved ones that have passed over, all of that's there. And so I will pause there and see if that makes sense and can elaborate as much as needed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then would you say that, at least in the way that you encounter it, it's your spirit guides or your team, we'll just call them your team, right? Because like you said, there's ancestors, there's guides, there's angels, whatever. So we have kind of like these teams. Are they the ones who, I guess, would you say give you the access? Is it through them?
Yeah.
Or is it through your higher self, would you say, that you access these records?
So like if we were doing a reading, I would get your permission, and I would, before we meet, because I have your permission, you give me your full name, I would access your record, but only because I've had your permission. And then when we would meet, we would open the record together of your record. And so it's just kind of energetically. Now, some people that are super visual, that have that clairvoyance, might actually see themselves going into, a space or meeting with the lords of the records or the librarians, so to speak, or going into rooms or books. That's not one of my main gifts. So for me, I'm bringing it through clairaudiently, clairsentiently, and then claircognizantly. So getting those downloads of information. And so for me, that's powerful. Now, when I do a reading, the first part is I actually access your higher self or your soul. So that's me going into your record on my own and kind of bringing down whatever message your soul, your higher self has for you. So that's going to be big picture. And a lot of that is around kind of like, what did you come here to do? And what's going to make you happier, more fulfilled, have some healing, some clarity and excitement about your future. Those are the kind of messages that I get. But then when we sit down together and I open your record with both of us in there, your spirit guides show up, your ancestors show up, sometimes your past loved ones show up, and mostly your spirit guides and angels are the ones that help you kind of come up with that plan of when you came down here for. So they're able to sometimes remind you. Sometimes they're really funny and will call you out on stuff. Like I had somebody that I worked with, a gentleman that was a personal trainer, and they're like, listen, you don't work out your hamstrings enough. And he just started dying laughing. They called his butt out. I had somebody where I was like, they're telling me that you needed to sharpen the knives in your kitchen. And she's like, for 6 months, I've almost been cutting myself because my knives are so dull. And so like, mind you, they come through with really great earth shattering information. But sometimes it's those things that to remind you, like, we're around and we're like checking you out, bruh.
Right? Like down to something that you would think was so minute. Like, so, okay, so you didn't work so you skipped leg day. But they're like, yeah, you skipped leg day.
I've seen you skip leg day more than once, bro.
Right? And we want you to know.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but they also knew that was a way to validate the information that I was coming through big time, but also like for him to be like, oh, they called me out. That's right. That feels like people that I would want around me, right?
Well, yeah, and that's something so real that anybody can, like you said, ground into and go, oh. So, I mean, yeah, now we could jump to like Lumeria or something, but like before we do that, you've got to know that like this is legit, you know?
Yeah. And It's usually, so like once I bring through that kind of big picture download of like the higher soul, the higher self, again, insert your beliefs here, that's going to be big picture. And then the questions that you bring, a lot of times the questions that you've written down before the session that I don't see, I actually cover in the download, hence the psychicness of it. But then also it's your guides and the people around you that are answering those questions. So they feel a little more 3D than just kind of the big picture from your soul. And so I find that to be really helpful for people because it's one thing to hear kind of this big 15-20 minutes of me talking about like what your soul wants you to learn, what you're here for, that sort of thing, to like your guides telling you about like lay back on the coffee or whatever it might be,
Wow, that's incredible. That is so incredible. Okay, so you go in, you get this big picture download, and then the guides come in with more specific stuff. I've heard too that even in Akashic record readings, you can even get information like your soul's origins. Like,
So For me, I accept what comes through. And so what that means to me is that it's like what that person needs to hear the most right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I don't have access where I can go in and be like, this is exactly who you were in your most recent past life. This is exactly, your karmic ties. But that information comes through if it's needed in that moment. So there could be somebody that's like, hey, I'm getting information like you and your mom haven't been getting along for a while. You don't understand where it's coming from. Actually, you guys were sisters in a past life. And that's where some of this comes from, past life energy. And then it allows someone to like really understand a little bit more. It's like, man, no matter what I tried, because we had this past life, and it helps them kind of move forward with that. So I'll have medical information come up around like someone that's either not drinking enough water, that maybe needs to get their minerals checked. I can be like, you have an injury right here in your neck. So they kind of, I would say like, I can't go in specific and ask for everything, but they do bring through a lot of that. I also pull up like if people are tied to like angels or galactics or the earth, things like that, that information comes through. I did a reading for someone recently, and I would never divulge that person personally their information. Her son was really tied to the Arcturians, and just technology, and it feels like he's going to do something around that. And so it's interesting that kind of came through. Take it for what it's worth. We always say, take what resonates, leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that that's the kind of information that can come through as well.
So interesting. It's funny that you say that. Like, I had an Akashic record reading, 10 years ago, maybe more. And at that time, I hadn't spiritually developed to the place where I am today. And it's funny because she mentioned that. She was just like, oh, there's so much starseed energy with you. And I'm thinking, what is that? And she's like, well, it's just like where your soul originates from. Like, you tend to originate from here, and these are the things you're tied to. And I'm kind of like, okay, cool, right? And it wasn't until 2 years ago, that like I really understood that, and I went back and reviewed all of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's almost like sometimes we get this information that we're not ready for, and we can't integrate it. Yeah. And we have to have more, I'd call it wisdom, lived experience of the knowledge that was given to then be able to reflect back on it and make sense of it. And so do you write this down or record it for people?
Yeah. Exactly that. It's interesting. I was teaching a class last night for a bunch of grads from a certification I did called Soul Reading Method, and they wanted to learn more about Akashic Records. And so Nikki Novo, who's the lead teacher, was like, hey, would you come in and talk more about that? And so I was talking to them about different kinds of readings, right? It's like sometimes somebody is just ready to like have something that needs to be healed, and that comes up. Sometimes somebody needs like just the availability, the idea that like the information that I'm giving them is real and that people like me exist. So somebody that has integrity, that's able to pull information from somewhere they can't explain, science can't explain, but it's actually real. So I might just sit there and tell them their whole life story, not knowing them from Adam. And it's more about verification for them, right? And then the other one I see, and it kind of touches on what you do, is where there's somebody that's lived their life so strongly for so long that you're introducing big picture things that kind of their soul is ready to move on to and to change. A lot of times it's where people have like a lot of control in their life, or they're like scheduling themselves out, or like they must load the dishwasher a certain way. And so they're holding on to all this control stuff. And so Spirit's saying like, we need you to make these changes in all areas of your life, because it's going to leave you more room for joy, more room for happiness, more room. And so it's introducing these big picture ideas, knowing that for that person, it's going to take maybe even a year to really integrate all that and see it in their life and then do something about it. And so what I usually do, not usually, I always, we record, I have an MP3, and more recently using Zoom, a recording. So they for sure get an MP3 so they can listen to it. I have an AI that does a meeting transcription notes.
Nice.
So they get those, which is really nice. But really the part that I love the most is anything that Spirit's brought through. They bring through examples, they bring through books, different kinds of therapy, different practitioners, all kinds of different things for people to learn and kind of help them with, like, again, breadcrumbs to figure out what their next part of their walk is. And so I provide that as well. What I usually tell people is be really present with me. Like, you don't have to take notes, like have a pad and pen, but be present with me. Let it wash over you, because it's going to be a lot, right? And then tomorrow or the next days, then listen back, take your notes, but then set yourself a reminder for 4 weeks, 6 weeks out. Listen to this again and see how it hits you then. I don't make a ton of predictions. I mean, that does come up sometimes if we're looking at timelines and different things, but it's really more about the like, wow, what I heard this time around and what I hear the second time around or 4 weeks later is completely different, but it all makes sense.
It is so true. It's funny because I've had readings where something just doesn't resonate at the moment because it's not in my personal field of awareness yet. It's obviously in my field, but it hasn't come to my conscious awareness. And so it's not until months later that I go back and revisit information. And I'm like, oh, that's happening in my now moment. And I did not
Right.
see it coming, but
Right.
she did,
Yeah.
she did. And that was a while ago. And that always blows my mind when those kinds of things happen.
And it's for sure a prayer that is part of kind of my intention before I do a reading is like, what's going to help them the most right now? So like that lovely reading that you got a few years ago, a lot of that part didn't hit you until a few years later. And for me, if someone's coming to me, it's because they're in a moment of transition. They need clarity. They need more hope in their life. They need healing, whatever it is. And so my hope is that like whatever they get, even if parts of it they get now, which I'm sure you did in your reading, parts of it they get later and so on, that's so important. And my whole thing is, whether you come to a reading once or twice a year, I wouldn't want to see somebody more than twice because it's about you living your life and implementing these things. And many times, they're asking you to do big things in your life. They're asking you to learn to listen more or to not react, or, it's things that come up in therapy all the time, but it's coming from a spiritual point of view. And they're saying like, we could invite more abundance, more joy, more happiness, more childlike, like wonder in your life, right? Like we're looking for all of that. Maybe you feel like you should be happy, but you're not. And so they're saying with these tweaks, this is where your soul wants to go. And so we're inviting you to do that. And here are some ways to do it.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about some of that discrepancy. Like, this is where your soul wants to go. And then why does our humanness, from your perspective, get in the way of that so much?
For sure. So a lot of times, there are so many answers to that question.
Right.
But what I would say is the first thing is we've been living our lives a certain way for a really long time, right? We know that from 0 to 9, maybe up to 14, we have those unconscious stories that have been going along in our head for a really long time. And that's how we're taught to view the world consciously and unconsciously. And so sometimes if we're not aware of those, it's hard to break out. So that's a whole jar of worms right there, can of worms right there we could get into. But I would also say, think about the layers of what our life brings us, right? The identities. So it's, who am I as a daughter? Who am I as a sister? Who am I as a partner? Who am I in my job? What are my identities? So like, what are all these identities? And like, what does my culture, my family, my friends, the world expect of me for all of those? And we're consistently plugging in all of that information, right? So if our soul's at the bottom of that, right? And our true essence is at the bottom of that, think about all those layers that are on top of that, whether we've chosen them due to pressure or we've chosen them because that's what we think we need to be good or to be better or to excel, whatever it is. And so when you add all those layers, you get further and further away from like, who am I? What do I want? Or even what does my inner child want? What did 9-year-old me really want? And so I'd like to talk about that as your truth, right? And so we get further and further away from that. And so a lot of the work I do is helping people start to roll those layers back. Now, sometimes there are things that happen in our life. I always say some chapters you start and some chapters are started for you. And so for me, when my dad passed, a lot of that identity around being a good daughter and who I was at work and who I was as a volunteer and as a sister and all of these things, a lot of them fell away from me because they just didn't really matter, Yeah. And so for me, it was, I'm a child of God or of source or whatever you want to believe in. And that was the only thing that mattered. It didn't mean that I didn't want to still be a good sister or a good worker, but I didn't find my identity in that. And so that way I was able to go back to the source of who I am and what I want. Now, that's an everyday practice, right?
Absolutely.
But a lot of times as adults, we're like, man, I have all the things. Like I have the husband or the wife or the kids or the 2.5 kids. Explain to me 2.5 kids. I don't know. The pets, the whatever, but I still don't feel fulfilled or happy as excited as I did maybe when I was in high school or middle school. And so a lot of that is going back and saying, well, what are the things that bring me childlike wonder? What are the things that and so helping people figure that out brings them closer to their soul. And the happier, more fulfilled they are, it turns out, the better partner, the better husband, the better wife, the better sister they become. But also their life feels so more expansive. And that's a little bit of the work.
So true. I think when we say it's important to put ourselves first, I think that's what that means, right? It means making sure that our cup is full, full of the things that bring us joy, excitement, wonder, and awe, so that we can then share that, with the people that we love and make sure that they have those experiences too,
And I would echo that, but I'd also even add a tweak to it and say, what are the things that you really want to do? Not what you think everybody else is going to think is exciting, or what are the things that are going to look good on Instagram or look like you did something different. It's no, really, what is it at your core that you're interested in, and following that? Because after a while, we're not taught to do that anymore. We're adding all these layers and all these responsibilities, and it just feels like a lot of weight, right?
It does. It does. And it's so funny because I know it's true in my case. I can look back at my 9-year-old self and I know exactly who she wanted to be.
Yeah.
Until the world was like, well, that's not really possible. And it's so funny because here we are now. This year, it is my reality.
It's
and
awesome.
It's so cool. I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's like it dawned on me last month,
I laugh. I call my dad my momager in the other side because he's, passed over. And so like he knew I was interested in this stuff while he was alive, but I don't think he would have ever seen it as a venue for like what I'm meant to do here or even work or anything like that. But now he's like so excited on the other side and totally into it. He's like, I have a daughter that can speak to dead people and souls and, whatever, but like keeps her integrity, is super transparent and, all of that. But I laugh because I'm like, I have this momager on the other side that like, while in life would have never really seen it, right? He was like corporate, right? And so it's just so funny how that changes, right? And then when we get to like, why are we here? What makes us happy? Now I understand there are responsibilities in life, right? Like I'm still working where I need to get some financial stability until I can do my business full time. So there is bridges, right? But it's like, what is like, it took me about 40 years, I'm 44 now, to figure out like, well, what do I really want to do and why am I here? And so when I started doing these readings and seeing the healing and the joy and the excitement it brought to people from a place of service, not ego, it's like, this is what spirit's working through me, right? Again, I am the channel. This is not me doing this. It's a spirit. They're just interpreting it through everything that I know. And to see what a change that can make in somebody's life, that's what I'm here to do, at least right now. You know what I mean?
It probably lights you up the most, right? Which is
right?
how
But it took 40 years.
Same. Yeah. I echo that so much. It was like, I always, I remember walking around like the weirdo in junior high, carrying around this Anna Dea Judith book about the chakras. And I would like show up to these park and rec classes at like 15 because I could walk to them from my house because I didn't have a driver's license. And like these women who were like my age now, in their mid 40s would like mentor me and be like, oh, that's cute. What's this 15-year-old doing like at these classes? But whatever, we'll teach her how to read the tarot.
So sweet.
Right. So sweet. But yeah, it was like nothing that I thought I could ever make a career out of or serve with. It was like, okay, I'll find a more traditional way to do it and I'll study psychology.
Yeah.
Until
I have a funny story about tarot cards as well. So the one time my aunt, when I was about 16, got me tarot cards. I think I was like a junior in high school and I grew up in New Jersey. And I remember I was like in homeroom, like looking at the book and doing something. And like one of the toughest girls that would whip your butt came up to me and was like, can you read mine? And I was like, oh crap, anything I say, she's going to kick my ass. And I was so scared. And so like, I did it, but I was mostly like using the book and whatever. And she's like, that was amazing. You know nothing about me, blah, 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 blah. But it scared the crap out of me. And I never brought the tarot cards back in and kind of put them to the side for a few years because I was like, oh, I don't want to ever be under that pressure again.
I know. Well, that is important too, because what I found for me, like my story, I had a lot of trauma. And when we have a lot of trauma, I think it fractures our sense of self, right? It fractures you from you and it limits the amount of trust that you have in your own well-being. Because when your senses and what you're seeing and interpreting in the world are constantly challenged or being told, no, you're wrong, then you start to think, well, maybe I am. And so for me, developing my intuition was about healing some of those traumas so that I could learn to trust my senses and trust that what I know is true. And that's really what helped me develop. And I'm wondering what can you share with the audience, to help them develop their gifts if they're like, okay, I know I'm getting these hits. I know that sometimes I get these awarenesses, but I feel like I maybe don't have control over them or can't just open them when I feel like I need them.
Yeah. So I would love to say even though I was able to do some courses where I was able to practice, not everybody has that money or that time, but there's so many, all those exercises I skipped early on. There are so many free books out there or cheap books or used books on Amazon as well as YouTube around exercises around intuition that can help you. And that helps to like get you feel like, just like, how can I use this for me? Right. Yes. And so some of the things that I like to talk about just to get people that are like dipping their toe in the water are 2 practices. One is a yes, no practice, and it's figuring out how yes and no feels in your body. So getting out of your brain and getting more into your body, because your body is actually way wiser than your brain. Because you've got your heart, you've got your nervous system, and your gut, which are all smarter than your brain, as well as connected to your brain, right? And so you know that with somatic work, the toroidal field, all the things that we learn. And so the easy practice there is, it's like, if I ask myself a question, what does yes feel like? Maybe it's like my shoulders come down. Maybe I feel a warm spot in my cheeks, whatever that is. And then no feels like a tightness or a pain in the side, whatever it is. And so when you start to kind of, and it sounds like play that game, but train yourself to do that, then you can start asking your body questions in the future of like yes and no, right? And that helps you a lot. It's like, because your body has so much more wisdom than your ego that runs from fear. Your body runs from love and from your heart,
yes.
Right? Because we make choices out of fear or love. The other one that I talk about is, I will say, I want to go out to eat. I'm not picking a place. So I will get in the car and I will just kind of feel like, yep, turn left here, go right here, whatever. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but then I somehow end up somewhere where it's like, oh, I forgot about this place, or
Nice.
would have never thought about this place, or here's a new place. And so that is just kind of learning kind of to use your intuition in an open place with like, there are no nothing bad that's going to happen, right? Because you're going to end up somewhere, right?
Yeah,
And so
you're going to eat.
Yeah, you're going to eat, right? You might be at a gas station with the best tacos you ever found. I don't know, like thinking about Austin, right? But what I'm saying is like, it's just two little things that you can do that will help you start to kind of get into your body. Because that's a lot of the work that I do too, is that in our culture, as well as just generally humans, like we learn to solve everything through our brain. But there's so much wisdom in our body. And what happens is when our body's trying to tell us something that doesn't match with our brain, that's sometimes where anxiety can come from, right? Because your body's trying to tell you something, your brain's not listening. And so a lot of the work that I do too is helping people understand how to get from their brain, answering things in their brain, to answering with both their brain and their body, and sometimes just their body. My therapist says, and I, again, will probably butcher it, but she's like, your head is asking a lot of questions that only your heart can answer, and vice versa. And to me, that's so powerful.
It is. Yeah. And I think part of that exercise of that yes, no question is about heart brain coherence, right? Yeah. It's about syncing and linking the heart to the brain so that you are unified within yourself, creating unity between your body and your mind, because oftentimes those are at odds. And, when we're talking about psychotherapy, we're often working with people who didn't feel safe in their bodies. Absolutely. For so many reasons. And so it's hard to trust or to live inside of a body that doesn't feel safe. We're so used to living outside of it that coming back home to us, returning to the wisdom of the body and learning to feel safe in it is such a critical, experience, not just for trauma, but for developing our intuition and bringing us closer to our souls and our hearts.
Totally. And for people that are new to this might sound like a little woo, right? Sliding scale woo again. But what I would say is think about how good you feel when you just got off the Peloton, or when you've gone out for a walk and didn't do anything but listen to a podcast or some music, or when you had a dance party in your kitchen. It got you out of your head and into your body, right? And so like that gave your brain a break, it connected your nerves, your system, like all of that things. So this is stuff where you're actually already doing that today.
Mm-hmm. So true. That is so real. Yep. And it's something we often don't do enough, because one of those layers I think that we talked about that sometimes we need to shed or overcome is the layer of just societal expectations and norms, which is this is somehow wiser than the rest of us,
And that comes up in my readings a lot of like asking yourself, why am I doing this? Is it because I feel like I have to? Because some rule that society or my family told me, or the this or the that? It's like basically trying to roll back to, am I doing this out of love or fear? And so I ask people, just start questioning the things like, why do I care so much about how you put something in the microwave? Right. Or how I folded the towels or whatever, and is that really important? And should I be holding on to that? Because what that will roll back is like stress, fear, anxiety, all of that will roll back to fear. Or it'll come from a place like it's love. I'm loving myself. I'm loving the people around me. I'm doing whatever. Or sometimes you may not know. And so even just asking that question day to day gets us really thinking about is this something that is in one of those layers, right? Of what was told to me or who I'm trying to be? Or does this really feel aligned with me, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So true. I know when I'm working with clients, I usually especially clients who are overcoming codependency and things like that, I'll ask them, are you making the choice out of inspiration versus obligation? If I'm inspired, it's coming from my spirit. If I'm obligated, there's going to be some kind of social or emotional consequence like guilt or shame if I don't do that thing, which is fear, right? But yeah, we have to break those cycles and ask ourselves that question all the time.
Yeah. It comes from too, like work I'm doing for myself, but I see coming up generally. And so sometimes, we experience these things a little bit before the general public just because we work with people. But it's moving from that sometimes uber masculine, sometimes toxic masculine of like, go, fight, do all the things, have all the lists, keep going, to being a little bit closer to having more divine feminine and divine masculine, right? So that beautiful push from the divine masculine, but moving into our divine feminine of receptivity, creativity, alignment, flow, heart led, not brain led. And so for me, a lot of my prayers and the work that I do now is even just rolling back and saying, like, am I doing this, especially corporate America, very, very masculine, right? And so, like, how can I reframe if I were to go back to corporate America and do that because I need the financial stability or some other job? But how can I do that from a place of love and a place of fulfillment? And how do I shift that in my life? So for me, that's big picture, something I'm working with, but it does come up in readings a lot too.
Gosh, yes. Yes. I think anytime I don't even want to say anybody's experienced trauma, because it's almost like the societal expectation of us coming from a more masculine, perspective. And that seems to be what's considered.
Sorry.
No, you're totally good. What's considered, right or.
Yeah. Like a great example of it is, I take myself out. There's a park nearby. It's actually where they used to film The Walking Dead. I never really watched it, but it's the area that they filmed it in. It's beautiful. And so I've got my little iWatch or Apple Watch, whatever it is. And like, I will go and like hit that I'm like timing of like how long I'm walking and how many steps and whatever. And I'm like, the other day, like Spirit was like, yeah, that's great. But like, if you're just here for the walk, for the release, to like connect with nature, take the damn watch off. You don't need to track yourself. It's okay. Yeah. And I did that. And it's not that I was like super crazy about my analytics, but it was just the fact that you would look at it and see how long I've been walking and then this and then that. Now, again, I'm a single person, so I don't have a ton of responsibility, but I was able to do that. And so even just that simple practice of like disconnecting from the watch, taking the watch off or not tracking it or whatever it is, really disconnected me. And really it came more from a place of love and receptivity and like enjoy the space. And you don't have to be consistently looking at your watch and whatever it was. And that was just a simple example. And I was like schooled by Spirit again.
Wow. Right. So it's no longer competitive, of like many steps and making sure I achieve. This is what I feel inspired to walk, and I'll be done when I feel like I want to be done. And I want to go back to what you said about being in the car too, because what I loved about that example of like, let me just drive wherever I feel like I want to eat. There's something about Spirit, at least in my perspective with it, demanding that we're more flexible. I think sometimes rigidity, whether that's like mental rigidity or just structural rigidity, can keep us from being more intuitive, because we have to be able to move where Spirit wants us to move. And sometimes we're being asked to pivot. And I feel like if we can't be flexible, if we can't be receptive or feminine enough to be led in some way, because we're so tied to like an outcome or an agenda, that it inhibits us from connecting too.
Yeah, or being creative, because our minds are quantitative minds are in overdrive, living in kind of this uber masculine society, right? Yeah. So there's somebody I was talking to, big picture, in a reading about control and finding more time for herself, and the same thing, getting out of her head and into her body. And so like we were talking about how she needed time to just like have like once a day or, every few days time to do something creative, but it had to be what she was inspired to do in the moment. So I was like, essentially, here she is scheduling, right? Which is super masculine time to be spontaneous.
Right.
And I mean, maybe that was the first step for her, right? Because it's like, okay, I've got 2 hours to be spontaneous. And it was about taking care of herself and saying like, okay, I'm not going to do for my kids or my family or my whatever. She's so used to doing for everybody else. And then also filtering in all of those identities and all those things that she's doing, that she's not doing anything for her soul, her inner self, her inner child. And so that was the first step. So scheduling time for spontaneity. But that will help her start to say, well, what I want to do. She doesn't even know, right? It's like, do I read a book? Do I do a yoga class? Do I walk around the neighborhood? Do I go shopping? Like whatever it is, but it couldn't be something that was like ongoing self-care, like getting your nails done or whatever it might be for somebody that's like usually in part of your plan. It had to be something spontaneous that felt fun, that felt exciting. And so I just laugh because it's like, okay, that was like step one of spontaneity.
Plan it in, schedule spontaneity. Oh my gosh, I love that. It's so funny. We're talking about something, woo, but I think the tools are so grounded. Really the lessons are so grounded because what I found is that in order to, I mean, all of life is spiritual. None of
Yeah.
it is not, you
Yeah.
know. But what I found is that to really be present, we have to really embrace our humanness. And that's what this is ultimately about. It's not about transcending our humanness, it's about being in it fully embodied.
I also laugh because I like there's a book I've been writing in my head for about 3 years now. So I'll let you know when it comes out on paper. But the idea is that like I think a lot of what we're here to do is to choose our own spirituality or our own religion. And so the working title is Religion is a Buffet or should be a buffet. And the idea is there's so many cool practices and rituals and beliefs and all different both religions and spirituality that I think part of our walk is to figure out what is that for us. Do we believe in a connection to a higher power? How do we feel like we should act in our community and our family? What represents what we want for the future and who we are? And I think there's something so powerful about that. The problem is that a lot of times people don't ponder that until something bad really, really happens when they need something to hold on to, something to believe. And so my encouragement is to start building that, whether you believe in spirit, angels, spirit guides, your loved ones that have passed, whoever that is around you, I encourage it. But start to realize that it's not just you here, right? You've got a team on the other side, believe it or not. However you choose to believe, but start figuring out what those beliefs are, what those practices are, because it will make you stronger when those things, those chapters that you didn't ask to start.
Yes, absolutely. It is so true. I've noticed when people first start to kind of develop on the on the spiritual path, one of the first things that they notice is synchronicity. And it's a beautiful way to realize that we do have a personal connection with the divine, however you want to conceptualize or define divine.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the first little sprinkling of magic that
Yeah.
people receive.
I love that. I get chills around that because I think it's a reminder that we are actually creators in our life as opposed to life happening to us. We are actually creating it. And so we can go out, there's a 30,000 foot view all the way down to like right in your head view around that. So that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea is when people feel like, God, life is just happening to me, know that like actually we are here to be creators and to work with the universe. But to do that, we have to find our alignment, our beliefs, and our flow. But when people start to do that, that's exactly when those synchronicities start to show up because it's showing you it's working around you, whether you're seeing angel numbers or you're getting a parking spot or all these different things are, the synchronicities can be many. You're in a tough spot and enough things break for you so that you can get where you need to go. That wasn't just done by you. That's the universe helping you out. And so it's easy to feel like everything is happening to us. But the stronger, the more courageous part is like, how am I a part in this? And how can I change my life?
Absolutely. And I believe that 100%. And it's almost like we live in a hall of mirrors. The universe is just reflecting back to us what's held in our deepest beliefs in our subconscious mind and mirroring it and reflecting it back through our reality. It's almost like our brain is this filter and our body is a filter. And so we can only see the experiences that we align with. And so if we believe that we're unworthy and the people and the situations that demonstrate our lack of worth will be mirrored back to us because we do live in such a loving universe
Vibration you're in.
that
Yeah.
yes, that the world is showing you, God is showing you, hey, you're still feeling unworthy. And so I'm going to show you that so that you can see what the wound is because you must be unaware so that you can now, overcome it and change your perspective and have new experiences that now reflect this new sense of internal reality. And synchronicities, I think, are the positive part of that mirror. Hey, you're on the right path. Here's your breadcrumb. I'm going to reflect this back to you in this form of magic and synchronicity because that's the vibration that you're in. So it's like this hall of mirrors works both ways.
It's like the friend of yours that always attracts the same guy or type of girl until their vibration increases and they feel better about themselves or they do some work. they change the energy or anything that they've been holding in emotionally. And then all of a sudden they attract all the great guys and girls. And it's kind of like you're going to see that over and over again. And I think the simplest form of this that I see that I can point to that happens ongoing for me is when I talked about how when I do a reading, I ask somebody to energetically, so physically write down on paper 3 questions. Mm-hmm. They could be anywhere in the world. And it's usually, I say, do it 24 hours before a reading. So then when I go in and I do a download and I get all this information from spirit, when I sit down with them, again, they may or may not have ever met me, know me from Adam. I go in and give them this download. Usually 3 questions that they've asked about are covered in that download 5% of the time, if not 2 of the questions. So I still will go into more depth and we'll talk, and I don't know the questions. So they'll just kind of be laughing, or I'll see them like checking the questions off the list. And so then when we get the questions, they're like, you actually have covered all 3 of my questions. I'm like, okay, well, let's get more details. Let's get more. And so we'll and then I'll hear the way that they phrase the question. And it's really powerful, but it's that simple act of even that energetic of writing it down, asking for help, that sort of thing, that energy somehow feeds and that goes into my download, which is amazing. It's magic. And I'm skeptical. I'm born in New Jersey. Like, it's in my blood. I'm still a skeptic. I still don't believe everything I see. I don't believe everybody that says they can do something. And so for me, every time I'm surprised. And I think maybe because I want to be humble and transparent and have integrity around this, that's the way I've got to be. Because as soon as I think I have a part in this or that I'm doing this, then I should no longer be doing this work.
I love that you said that, right? And I hope you never lose that, because I feel that too. It's like, I am sometimes so overcome with joy and wonder and awe at the beautiful way that spirit works. Through people, whether they're even aware of it or not. Like you said, you're not aware that you're answering those questions. And I think sometimes people get these misconceptions, like, oh, well, you're psychic, you should know. It's not that. It's like sometimes we just say these things and people are like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what my grandmother used to say. I can't even believe that you're giving me that advice or telling me that phrase. That would happen to me all the time, even as a therapist. I wasn't being a psychic for somebody. I was being their therapist,
I also like to say, when big things have happened, before I got into this work, when I had that engagement that broke up, for me, interestingly, I felt like spirit or God or source, whatever you want to believe, or my spirit guides, I heard a lot of messages through people that I would not have thought were messengers.
Yes.
And so it was really interesting because it usually wasn't when we were talking about my situation. Maybe I was just catching up with them or whatever it was, but something that they said in that conversation felt like a message to me, whether it was something that, again, my grandmother would have said, something that I just needed to hear a certain way that I then applied to my situation or what I was wrestling with that day or how I was feeling. And so what I like to say is if you're really listening to the people that are that love you and you're talking and you're in those situations or feeling highly emotional, sometimes the messages come in the forms of unlikely messengers, and that is spirit working as well.
Absolutely. My gosh. I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago. I was pondering something a lot, just so in my head. Should I do this? Should I do that? And I get cut off in traffic and I'm like, oh, of course, I'm already frustrated, whatever. But when I got cut off in traffic, it was my deceased stepdad's name on the license plate. It was a custom plate with his name. And I was like, all of a sudden, just instant mood shift of oh my gosh, why don't I just ask my stepdad?
Yeah.
And I did. And so I started having a conversation with my deceased stepdad about it. And it's wouldn't you know it, next day I go to sleep and wake up and it's the answer is somehow just there.
Yeah.
Because I slowed down, I opened my heart, I stopped thinking.
Yeah, you got out of that negative vibration, that emotion, and it's just it was enough to rock you. Yeah.
It was.
I also tell people some of the best times to get messages, if you're just wondering, someone that you passed that is trying to get through to you or your spirit guides, it's when we're doing something that we do and our brain kind of goes into auto mode. So when you are driving, when you are in the shower, which it feels like we always get random ideas or messages in the shower and then you can't write them down, or doing the dishes, something that you're just doing ongoing, maybe you're rolling pasta, whatever it is, because we're kind of in close to a theta mode, that's when a lot of times for me, my dad's passed, I get emotional when I work with him because he's my dad. And so I don't let him in all the time, but a lot of times when I'm not paying attention, I don't have my guards up and I'm driving, that man sure shows up with love, of course, but it makes me laugh because I'm like, oh, yep, I was just driving, not paying attention. I mean, paying attention to the road, surely, but my brain was kind of either listening to music or whatever it was, and that was a beautiful place for our loved ones or spirit to come through as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm trained in hypnosis, and
Yeah, you know more than anyone.
People think, oh, hypnosis, that's so woo woo. It's so weird. Like, are you going to remember everything? And that's my favorite thing to tell people is like, well, you're probably in a trance as many times a day as you drive your car or take a shower or blow dry your hair. Each time you do, it's like you drop into these slow brainwave states. And that's all we're doing here. It's such a natural state change because it's actually, I think, where we're supposed to be, at least in alpha more often, than beta, high beta. We're constantly, running in this world of mental engagement, that we're in.
For sure. And like, I love hypnosis. I've like worked with other hypnotherapists and they're incredible. I also like, for people that may or may not be able to afford that, binaural beats that you can find. Sometimes just putting those on and doing something will really help your brain come down. One of the big things I talk about is meditation. I know people kind of cringe sometimes when it comes to meditation because you either love it or you've tried it 1,000 times and it feels like it's not working, right? And so one of the things that I have on my website that's a free download, so it basically talks about like 7 or 8 different kinds of meditation, right? And so I kind of liken it to like picking out a pair of shoes for the day or for an event. It's like, what do you feel like you're going to need right then? And so I think where we don't do a good job talking about meditation is people think it's like, I've got to close my eyes in a quiet room and not think about anything and have no thoughts. And that's actually not what meditation is. It's very much about letting those thoughts come up and come out and then getting to a point where maybe you don't have any or you're able to hear things. Because we talk about praying a lot, right? Whether you write in a journal or whether you pray, and that's speaking to a higher power, speaking to the universe. But how often do you listen? And that's what meditation is, right? And so for me, like I have all these different kinds of meditation, and then I use Insight Timer, which is a free app where you can go in, and I've like given you 2 or 3, actually 3 for each type of meditation, where you can go link to the free, I don't get any payment for it or anything. It's really just to get people enjoying meditating. And then I'm working on a quiz where they answer like 6 or 7 questions, and then it will pull up the 2 types that are best for you based on how you learn, how you listen, all these different things. And that will help people start to figure out, okay, there's more than one way to meditate and what's going to work best for my kind of brain and my kind of person and the kind of time I have and the way I'm feeling right now.
Awesome. I'm going to link those resources on our website in the show notes too. So anybody who's listening right now who wants to learn more, schedule a reading, learn how to meditate, access these tools, will be able to go into the show notes and be able to grab those tools. Yeah.
Again, I'm not making any money off of this. It's just really in higher service because there's so many good things about meditation and so many ways to do it that I'd love for people to have a chance, a fighting chance, if you will.
Right. And I love that you say that because I totally agree. I remember having the misconception that meditation was about having to clear my mind and have no thoughts, when really it was about becoming the observer of those thoughts and then just ultimately watching them slow down, and then the landscape of my mind would change at some point. And I don't know when that point was. It's almost like falling asleep. Like when you fall asleep, at some point, the thoughts slow down, the noise in the room goes away. You can somehow tune it out, and then the pictures come on.
And then you're able to, that's exactly.
And you get information. So meditation it's the same process as falling asleep. You just need to stay awake, which is why we tend to sit up instead of lie down. So it's almost like falling asleep, going through those processes that we're usually unaware of and becoming aware of them. And that's it. You're just becoming more aware.
But that's also where people have trouble sleeping. And that's why I'm like, well, that's where meditation also helps. Because they're like, oh, if I can't sleep, I can't meditate, right? And what I'm saying is by learning meditation, you'll actually help your brain and your body to be able to sleep and get that full REM sleep, right? That full cycle. But what I think what is great about meditation is how exactly what you're saying. The idea is you're allowed to have your thoughts come up. I like to vision them as like on a cloud. If I think of something and then it floats away, or you see a balloon and then it bursts. Mm-hmm. So allowing your body to go through the checklist, all the things. The people that can go immediately into having like nothing in their brain are Tibetan monks that, don't talk to people and meditate 12 hours a day. And God bless, they are there doing some incredible work, but that's not the life that we live day to day. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it is important to talk about meditation, because that's another great way to connect. So whether you're looking for spirit guides to meet your spirit guides or your angels, or you just want to go and clean your energy before you walk into the house, you had a really rough day, you don't want to take that energy home with you. It could be anything that you're looking for. Sometimes it's just listening to, sound bowls in your ears and hearing that, seeing that that come across your body. And so that's why I like to bring this up. I know we were talking about Akashic Records, but I feel like this is a great practice that helps people as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this ties into something you said earlier, which is, intention drives the session. And just like with meditation, it's so important to be really clear. What are you looking for in your intention? Because ultimately that will drive the outcome of your meditations.
It will also become really fun. So again, not paid by Insight Timer. I just like it as an app because there's so many free options. You'll start to play around and find out like what meditation teachers do I like? What types do I like? How can I fit in a 5-minute meditation arm in the car before I go into this meeting? Or maybe I get, an hour to meditate and I get to go on this incredible guided journey into the Akashic Records or to the shamanic journey, or maybe just to somewhere lovely where I can let my body relax. And so there's so many things that tie that to everyday practices. So it can be something that you do for 2 minutes or something that you do for 2 hours. And there's everything in between, which really makes it easy because again, people are like, oh my God, I got to sit in a dark, quiet room. I live in Midtown. There's no quiet here.
Yeah. So do you drop into a trance or meditative state before accessing the Akashic Records for others?
Yeah. So the way that I do it, and there are many ways, for me, I use a prayer that was taught through kind of the lineage of teachers that I have. So usually I would share that information, but because it kind of came down through the lineage. But Linda Howe, and there are many prayers that you can find online as well as kind of come up with your own. Some people will use a visualization. They'll do like a meditation where they see themselves physically going into a library and going into the records. Some people are able to do it with just intention, right? So sitting with themselves and having the intention to get into the records, and then they can kind of feel that. So the answer is I use a pathway prayer. And so that allows me now, before that, I do my energetic hygiene. So I'm doing grounding, connecting, shedding anything I don't need, and, asking for protection, that sort of thing. So then what I do is I go into somebody's record or my own. And from there, I'm actually channeling. So that's me I can feel kind of a pull on my chest a little bit. That's how I feel it. And that means I'm in the records. And I'm able to then bring through information, and then I close the records and then have to clean my energy afterwards. Sometimes I'm not so good about cleaning my energy, and I've had issues where I regretted that. So
yeah, I've experienced that as well. It can be really physically uncomfortable.
That's what it was both times. One time I had felt into somebody's hip problem to see, was there some sort of emotional background in it, spiritual background for or was it just purely a physical issue? And I didn't clean my energy afterwards. And I woke up the next day and I could feel my hip. And I'm like, am I at the age where I slept wrong and I now have a hip problem? Is that where we're at today? And then I thought about it. And so I called the person who I did the reading with and I said, is your hip pain on this side? Does it feel like this? And does it feel like it's radiating to here? And she's like, yes. And then that was exactly how I felt. And so I had to stop what I was doing. I was at a festival and went and cleared my energy. Within 30 minutes, it went away. Another time I was sitting in a space where my friend's mom had shoulder surgery. And she had been sitting there for days and days recovering. She wasn't in that spot. When I went to visit her, I sat in that spot for 30 minutes as we caught up. And I went out to walk and came back in. But as I was walking, my shoulder tightened up. And I was like, what is locked up? What is happening? And I came in, I said it to her, and she's like, oh, that happened to my daughter, who happens to be a really big empath. I don't know that she knows how to control it yet. And so I went into the pool and I did a quick energy cleanse and it went away within 15 minutes. Yeah. But that's what happens when you pick that stuff up.
Absolutely, it does. Yep. Oh my gosh. Well, Stephanie, this conversation today was so incredible. And I'm really excited for our listeners to take some of these tools. I feel like you just gave them so many tools that they could use in the third dimension, and just to help them be more human, to help them develop these other aspects of their spirituality. This was really beautiful.
I appreciate that. And I tell people, take time and have patience and love with yourself, a grace, because, we're so used to getting information, exactly what we need right now, have it next day, Amazon, that some of these practices just take time. So if meditation doesn't work the first time, give it a little bit more time, try a different kind, that sort of thing, because your mind, body, and soul will thank you for it.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you know anybody who could benefit from this information too, if you're listening and you know a friend who needs to hear this today, please and please share with your friends too, because I feel like collectively we are going through a shift. We are going through an awakening. And I know a lot of people are having these experiences and maybe don't know how to conceptualize it. So if these tools can help, please feel free to share. So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next time.